It's one day later, and I still can't believe it. The Jets pulled off a shocking upset yesterday over the Buffalo Bills. They are in the AFC East race. They're contenders in the AFC now. How did all of this happen? That's what we'll talk about today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, November 7th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangrenNation.com. Thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. It's a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button wherever you are watching or listening, and click on the bell if you're watching on YouTube. That way you'll get notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and like the show, please give it a big thumbs up. These things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. We are here to break down a stunning result in the NFL yesterday as the New York Jets beat the Buffalo Bills 20-17 at MetLife Stadium. You could be the biggest Jets fan in the world. You probably were not expecting a win yesterday. The Jets were coming off a bad loss to the New England Patriots a week ago, but it was really more about Buffalo. The Buffalo Bills, to this point in the NFL season, have been the best team in the AFC. You could argue, maybe not record-wise because Philadelphia is still undefeated, but you could argue they've been the best team in the NFL so far this year. They looked like a juggernaut. Even this improved Jets roster, it felt like was going to have a tough time winning this game. But in the NFL, there are 2 different elements that come into play every game. The opportunities that are presented to you and whether or not you take advantage of them. And heading into this game, I said this on Friday, if both teams played their A games, Buffalo was probably going to win. And that's not a negative thing to say about the Jets. It's just a reflection of how good Buffalo's been this year. It's a reflection of the talent they've had on this roster. The question for the Jets was whether they would get breaks. And if they got the breaks, would they take advantage of them? And that's exactly what happened. The Jets needed some fortunate bounces to go their way. And it's a reflection of the improved talent level on this team that they were able to take advantage of those bounces, because there have been so many times over the last 5 to 10 years where the Jets have faced a team that did not play its A game, but the Jets just were not good enough to take advantage of it. The fact the Jets were able to take advantage of these breaks shows you the improved talent level once again. And really, at the beginning of the game, it looked like everything was going to bounce against the Jets, because on the opening kickoff, Braden Mann slips and mishits the ball, and Buffalo gets the ball at the 45-yard line on their first series. So I'm sitting there saying, all right, we need some fortunate bounces for the Jets. And the game begins with a really unfortunate bounce. Buffalo gets a short field. And then to exacerbate the problem, on the first play from scrimmage, Stephon Diggs burns Sauce Gardner. Maybe the first time Sauce has been legitimately burned all season long for a long game to put Buffalo in scoring position. You know, Sauce may have had some miscommunications on some red zone plays, but that may have been the first time all year where he was legitimately just beaten. Fortunately, though, a few plays later, Josh Allen makes a major mistake. He throws a really bad interception to Jordan Whitehead. So the Jets kind of dodge a bullet at the beginning, but the first half really doesn't go the Jets' way. To me, it feels like Buffalo is completely dominating this game. They jump out to a 14-3 lead. The Jets are not playing well on either side of the ball. Josh Allen's, which was one of my fears heading into the game, Josh Allen's running really effectively. Jets had kind of a breakdown during a brief moment when C.J. Mosley was out of the game. Jamie and Sherwood took a bad angle to Allen on a third down scramble. Then Allen had a long touchdown run. It's 14-3. The Jets are struggling to get much going on offense. It feels like this game's kind of going the way people were expecting it to go. And you have to remember, Buffalo entered this game as a double-digit road favorite. The Jets put together what I thought was one of the key drives of the game near the end of the first half. They took over on their own 25 after Buffalo's touchdown. They put them ahead 14-3 with around 6.5 minutes left in the first half. And they put together a huge drive. It was a 13-play touchdown drive. And to me, the biggest play came the first play after the 2-minute warning, because they had a 4th and 1. And they went for it on the Buffalo 32 rather than kick the field, which I thought was the right move. Even if they did not get it and Robert Saleh would have been criticized for it, I thought it was the right move because you got to roll the dice sometimes. Sometimes you have to steal a possession when you're undermanned. So I thought Robert Saleh being aggressive there was good. And Zach Wilson hit C.J. Uzomah. It was a 5-yard gain to extend the drive. And that had two key impacts in this second quarter. The first is that obviously it gave the Jets a chance to score a touchdown to get the game to 14-10. That was huge. But beyond that, because it came like right after the 2-minute warning, Jets kick a field goal there. Buffalo has pretty much 2 minutes at its disposal for an offense that was really on fire at that point. The Jets were able to drain the clock, and they were able to score a touchdown later in the series. It came on a it came on a Michael Carter 6-yard touchdown run to cut it to 14-10. But the Jets also drained enough time that Buffalo really did not have much time with the ball. The Bills actually were able to mount a drive. They got the ball with around half a minute left in the first half, and they were able to get it on the fringes of field goal range, but Tyler Bass missed a 55-yard field goal. And it was because the Jets were able to convert that fourth down and essentially drain an additional 90 seconds, because if Buffalo has more time there, they're able to get into better field goal range. So the Jets go to the locker room, it's 14-10, in a game that feels like Buffalo's dominated it. And that's the point where I start to feel good about this thing, because the Jets really avoided the knockout punch. And I say this so frequently, and I've said it negatively about the Jets, and fortunately it really hasn't come back to bite them aside from last week against New England. When you have a chance to put a team away, you got to take it, because you leave a team in the game, bad things happen to you. And Buffalo found that out the hard way yesterday. Now, the Jets took the opening drive of the second half, and this was a drive that I felt like kind of set the tone for the rest of the game, because the Jets took 8.5 minutes off the clock. It was 14 plays. It also involved a really bizarre delay because the sky cam, the camera that they put over the field, they had some issues with the wiring, I guess. So they had to take it down because it looked like it was about to fall on somebody. So that delayed things even longer. Unfortunately, the series ended on what was probably Zach Wilson's one big mistake of the game, where he took a strip sack from Von Miller and fumbled the ball away. And Cedric Ogbuehi, I still don't know how he didn't recover it, because he jumped on the ball and somehow it got away from him. So Buffalo got the ball back. But this sequence, I think, was actually kind of important in a sense. And, as the Skycam delay was happening, there were lots of Jets fans who were frustrated because they're saying, well, the Jets are on this drive right now. They're moving the ball really effectively. And the Jets, this was a good drive. The Jets actually extended the drive on a fake punt. Ashton Davis, on a 4th and 1, Ashton Davis converted a fake punt. It was snapped to him and he ran it. So the Jets were able to continue. And again, that's a situation where you're stealing a possession. You got to roll the dice sometimes against when you're undermanned. And that's what the Jets did. But this Skycam delay, people were worried that it ruined the Jets' momentum. I don't think it really played a big impact, but to the extent maybe it played a minor impact, I think it maybe helped the Jets a little bit, because the Bills had that short series near the end of the first half. They ran a couple plays and got it into field goal range, but they had less than a half minute. Right before that series, the Jets had a long drive. It was a drive that lasted about 6 minutes. So Buffalo had the ball after that 6-minute drive. Then halftime comes. Then the Jets put together this 8.5-minute drive. And during this 8.5-minute drive, there's a delay because the Skycam falls. And that's a lot of time for a Buffalo offense to be on the bench. And it felt like maybe it broke their rhythm a little bit. And from that point forward, I don't want to say that I don't want to take that to an extreme, because I don't want to take away credit from what the Jets did defensively, because the Jets played a phenomenal second half on defense. Buffalo averaged under 2 yards per play in the second half. But after Zach Wilson's fumble, Jets got it right back. Quinnen Williams, on the first play, Buffalo ran and got a sack, and then that put them in a bad situation. Josh Allen throws another ugly interception to Sauce Gardner. So all is forgiven for Zach Wilson. A couple plays later, Zach Wilson hits James Robinson for a screen, a 7-yard touchdown. Jets take the lead. Now, the Bills put together the one drive of the second half. They tied it up. The teams exchanged punts. And the Jets ended up on their own 4-yard line with just under 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And this was one of, maybe in all the years I've been watching the Jets, one of my favorite drives I've ever seen, because the Jets just ran the ball at will. It was James Robinson and it was Michael Carter. On the first play, James Robinson ran the ball for 9 yards. And I was watching the game with my father. And after that play, my father goes, and you have to remember, there's still like 7.5 minutes left in the game. My father goes, after Robinson runs it 9 yards to get the Jets to the 14-yard line, my father goes, if I'm the Jets, I don't run the ball the rest of the game. I go, Dad, come on. You're not going to get all the way down the field just running the ball. This is the NFL of 2022. You got to be able to throw the ball. Well, of course, the Jets keep running the ball effectively. It's run after run. Robinson for 7. Robinson for 16. Michael Carter takes a ball down the left sideline for 17. And suddenly the Jets are in scoring range and they're not running. And my father's like, see, I told you. The one series where, in the NFL, probably all season, where a team goes from its own 4 into scoring range without throwing the football. But, I'm not complaining because it certainly was good for the Jets. The Jets got all the way to the Buffalo 18 before they threw a pass. And it actually ended up being a really important pass because on 3rd and 5, just before the 2-minute warning, Zach Wilson hit Denzel Mims. Mims using that big body on a slant for a 12-yard gain. And this allowed the Jets to run the clock a little bit. They got to the 2. They were not able to punch it in. But Greg Zuerlein added a field goal with 1:43 left to give the Jets the lead. And from that point, Buffalo got the ball back. They got it back on their 25. Jets caught a break because there was a Buffalo holding penalty that wiped out a big completion from Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs. It was on 1st and 20. Allen hit Gabriel Davis for 18, so it's like the penalty got wiped out. But then the key play, Bryce Huff, with the strip sack on Josh Allen. The ball bounces back. The Bills end up losing 19 yards. They recover the fumble, but the Bills end up losing 19 yards on the play. And on the last play of the game for Buffalo, Sauce Gardner all over Gabriel Davis. I did not think it was interference. I know some people were worried about it. I thought it was actually a pretty clean play by Sauce. And the Jets have a shocking victory. And in many ways, I think this victory was the formula the Jets wanted to have before this. When they built this team, they dreamed of what happened yesterday. It was good defense, a great running game, and efficient enough passing. And as we continue on this Monday game recap episode of the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about how the Jets pulled off this victory. Well, the Jets certainly missed Breece Hall, but Michael Carter had an excellent game in his place yesterday. And if you were a daily fantasy player who had Michael Carter going for over 75 yards, you're twice as happy because the Jets won and you got what you were looking for. And if you do play daily fantasy, let me tell you about PrizePicks. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And if you don't want to deal with the concerns that you may have with if you pick a player the Jets are going up against, you don't know who you want to root for, you don't have to play the NFL. They have other sports. They have the NHL. They have the NBA. They have college football. Men's and women's college basketball is beginning soon. They got soccer. They've got esports. They got MMA. They got boxing. And yes, they have disc golf. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals. And they are operational currently in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 using promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you another $50. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you another $100. Don't forget to enter promo code locked on at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDON at PrizePicks. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to watch today because I'm there giving even more analysis on the Jets' victory over the Buffalo Bills. I'm also on Locked On NFL, so did the podcast round, so you can see me on a couple additional podcasts if you want more insight from me. Today we're breaking down the Jets defeating the Buffalo Bills 20-17 yesterday at MetLife Stadium. After a first half where it felt like the Jets were just kind of hanging on, and they did a good job because, like I said in the first segment, when they got to the halftime 14-10, I said, okay, this is okay, because Buffalo was playing really well, and the Jets withstood that punch. And now they got a chance to make it happen in the second half. And that's exactly what they did. And it's funny because that second half really played out the way I think the Jets wanted it to play. I think that this is like the vision the Jets had when they built this team. Because first of all, it's built on the defense. And every drive that Buffalo had in the second half, they had, aside from one field goal drive, but the other 3 drives they had were destroyed by the Jets' defensive line. There was a defensive lineman making a big play that essentially just stalled the drive, put Buffalo completely behind the sticks, and created a bad situation. On the first drive after the Zach Wilson fumble, it was Quinnen Williams delivering a sack. Quinnen Williams just building on just what a year he's having. There was a play on a kind of a bootleg on a later drive where Jermaine Johnson chased down Josh Allen in the open field and brought him down. And then on the last drive, Bryce Huff, after that big 18-yard, I was feeling bad after, Buffalo gets a holding penalty, so it's 1st and 20, and then they immediately hit an 18-yard pass. I'm feeling bad there. Bryce Huff with the strip sack on Josh Allen, hitting his arm. The ball goes backwards. They lose 19. The defensive line doing its job. The secondary, the corners, an amazing performance, again, by Sauce Gardner. After getting beaten on the first play of the game, bouncing back strong, just putting it out of his mind. And Sauce with a huge interception, the interception that kind of wiped out the Zach Wilson fumble. And then the last play of the game, him locking up Gabriel Davis. DJ Reed, the Jets, between Sauce and DJ Reed, they had a rough first half against Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs got DJ Reed a couple times on some shorter things, but they really bounced back in the second half. And whatever it was at halftime, whether to the extent the Bills maybe lost some of their momentum, to the extent the Sky Cam played into it, the Jets defense bounced back in a big way. Buffalo averaged less than 2 yards per play in the second half. They only had 1 field goal. Just a phenomenal second half performance by the Jets. On the offensive side of the ball, what can you say about the run game? Michael Carter and James Robinson combining for 125 yards. Carter with a rushing touchdown, Robinson with a receiving touchdown. And that last drive, when they went from their own 4 to the Buffalo 18 without putting the ball in the air. And you got to give the offensive line some credit, but these backs, listen, they don't have Breece Hall anymore. They don't have that guy who's going to take the ball 50, 60 yards the way Breece can. But this is a good tandem. I said it during the offseason that I felt like Michael Carter was going to be the complementary back to Breece Hall. But it was a luxury to have a guy who, in his own right, is a legitimate number 1 back in this league as your backup in case something happened to Breece Hall. And James Robinson, that trade already looking like a winner for the Jets. I thought Robinson played really well in this game. He had that touchdown. He had those runs that kind of ignited that final drive. And then the passing game. And this is really where I give the Jets the most credit. First of all, Zach Wilson bounces back after a very rough performance last week against New England. But as much as I give credit to Zach, I got to give it to Mike LaFleur, and I got to give it to Garrett Wilson, because this was a ferocious Buffalo pass rush. I mean, heading into this game, I had so much fear about what Buffalo could do to Zach Wilson, because Zach Wilson has not liked dealing with pressure this year. And they dialed up a deep pass early to Denzel Mims, which they barely missed. It was an incompletion. But aside from that, it was a very conservative passing game plan. And I felt like Mike LaFleur, after a rough game for Zach Wilson, wanted to simplify things for Zach Wilson. And that's how you have to bring a quarterback along, because at this point, Zach Wilson's not lifting the Jets up. It's up to the Jets to lift Zach Wilson up. And this is one of the things I think teams miss when they try and bring quarterbacks along. The first couple of years, quarterbacks are really trying to figure this thing out. So it's really on the team to lift the quarterback up. And you do need an efficient enough play. And I think the Jets got efficient enough play out of Zach Wilson yesterday. He avoided, aside from the fumble, he avoided the big mistake. He did a better job not putting the ball in harm's way. And the Jets were designing simple schemes for them, simple reads for him. And I think that there were three reasons I like the conservative passing game. First of all, it was you're kind of trying to rebuild Zach's confidence from square one after a rough game last week. You don't want him getting out of control. You want him staying in the pocket, making easy plays. That's the formula for the Jets passing game right now. The second is that Buffalo has that ferocious pass rush, and things were going to get ugly if they got into Zach Wilson's face. And by getting it out quickly, especially with a patchwork offensive line, because you have to remember, the Jets are not playing their best offensive line right now, especially at the right tackle position, because they've had so many injuries up front that they were not going to be able to hold up against this Buffalo pass rush if there were lots of 7-step drops. So getting the ball out quickly negated that Buffalo pass rush. And the third thing is, it kind of led the Jets to playing complementary football, because I go back to, and this is just my theory, I can't prove it, but it feels like the Buffalo offense kind of got out of rhythm after a really hot start. And that's in part because the Jets were sustaining drives, and with a little help from the Sky Cam, but in part that's because the Jets were really sustaining long drives and keeping them on the sideline. It's difficult to get into a rhythm when you're just on the bench the whole time. So by playing this kind of ball control game plan, which admittedly is not my favorite way to go when you're a big underdog, because I think sometimes you conservative yourself out of a game, but in this game it actually kind of worked for the Jets because it allowed them to keep that Buffalo offense, that explosive Buffalo offense on the sideline. And it really felt like there was something changed at halftime after Josh Allen and that Buffalo offense spent all that time on the bench. But I also have to give credit to Garrett Wilson in this game because he's clearly become Zach Wilson's go-to guy. Garrett Wilson, another strong performance, 8 catches, 92 yards. And, when I talk about lifting up a young quarterback, when I talk about building a young quarterback up, there are a few things that are better for a young quarterback than a receiver he can trust, a receiver he can go to. Because you don't want to have your young quarterback dropping back 30 times and scanning the entire field and trying to read all these complex coverages he's never seen before. Sometimes it's just easier if he's got a receiver he knows can get open no matter what. and he'll just look to him. And when the chips are down, he'll just look to him and throw it to him. And, I have to watch the film to be sure, but on that fumble, it almost looked to me like a play where Zach Wilson was looking to Garrett Wilson, and it was one of the few times all game he wasn't open, and Zach didn't know what to do. Again, you're bringing along a young quarterback. You're trying to make things as simple as possible for him. Well, instead of needing him to go through all these progressions, it's really simple if you could trust that your best receiver is going to get open. And maybe, I don't want to use the term blessing in disguise with Corey Davis, but Corey Davis has been Zach Wilson's safety blanket so far this season. And maybe Davis's injury, and you hope Corey Davis comes back, because the Jets certainly need him back in the lineup, but maybe this has forced Zach Wilson to trust the rookie a little bit more. Maybe it's forced him to go to Garrett Wilson and involve him a little bit more. And now they're building chemistry, and you're seeing this thing really come together. And you hope that Zach can build on this. It's kind of a catch-22, because if Zach Wilson played terribly, these next 2 weeks were going to be just nonstop frustration, nonstop panic over Zach's status, because you're heading into a bye. Maybe it's a little bit of a bad thing because that the Jets are heading into a bye now, because now he's coming off a pretty good game, and now it's good because now we get to spend 2 weeks talking about how Zach Wilson played effectively, but it's also maybe you'd want him to get back out there and kind of build on this performance, but you take the win. And this was the formula. Great defense, strong run game, help the young quarterback out, get enough from the young quarterback. That's the way the Jets wanted to build this team. That's the formula for victory, and that's the formula that we saw yesterday. Now, what does this mean big picture? It's a huge win over the Buffalo Bills. Does this win make the Jets contender? As we continue this Monday game recap episode of the Locked On Jets podcast, I'll offer some thoughts on that. The Jets pulled off a major upset yesterday. They were double-digit underdogs heading into the game. If you bet Buffalo, you lost. And if you bet Buffalo, well, you deserve to lose because you should not be betting against your own team. But if you are laying some money down on football or other sports this season, you should know that BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MMA, boxing, golf, the NBA, the NHL. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, the day after the Jets shocked the Buffalo Bills and really, I think, shocked the NFL. There were not many people, especially after the loss to New England last week, who gave the Jets much of a chance in this game. I felt like it was going to be a very difficult game for the Jets to win. The only thing I'll say in my defense is I did not do what I did last year against Tennessee and Cincinnati and say the Jets had no shot. I thought the Jets had a shot, but it was a very narrow path to victory, but the Jets were able to guide it. So what does this mean? Are the Jets contenders in the AFC? Can they win the division? Can they win the conference? Can they go to the Super Bowl? It's crazy to be talking about this at this point. Listen, you can't overread one game. That's the mistake a lot of people made last week. They read way too much into one loss to New England. You don't want to go too crazy after this victory. I think if you're being objective, you'd say, look, Jets played a great game. The fact the Jets could stand toe-to-toe against Buffalo, and I think really in the fourth quarter of that game, the Jets won the game more than the Bills lost it. The Jets caught some breaks early to stay in the game, but when the chips were down, the Jets outplayed the Buffalo Bills. Does this mean the Jets are better than Buffalo? I mean, I think based on what we've seen this year, Buffalo is still the favorite in the AFC East. And by the way, this is a tough division. This is a division where every single team is over 500 right now. New England's in last place. They're over 500 right now. So not an easy division to win. Miami's looking pretty good with Tua back in there. New England's looking tough. They just beat the Jets last week. But can the Jets win the division? Absolutely. They're 6-3 right now. It's very easy to dismiss what the Jets have done so far to this point, because you could say, well, they had a bunch of backup quarterbacks they had to beat. And, they had a miracle win against Cleveland, the game they probably should have lost. They got Skylar Thompson, Miami. They get the Pittsburgh quarterbacks, which is a really unstable situation. They get Brett Rippon. You get a Green Bay team that doesn't look any good, even if they have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is not looking like Aaron Rodgers. And then they lose to New England. How good is this team? Easy to ask that. Well, it's not so easy to say that anymore. And, at some point, you have to say they're beating NFL opponents. They're beating the teams that are in front of them on the schedule. They are 6-3. There's no such thing as an easy win in the NFL. And the Jets, maybe they're getting breaks, but they're taking advantage of those breaks in a way that they have not in years past, in a way a lot of teams don't. A lot of teams get fortunate scheduling situations happen to them, and they don't take advantage of them the way the Jets are taking advantage of them. It just feels like things are really lining up this year for this to be a potentially special Jets season. So I'm not saying the Jets are the favorites right now, but at this point, after they just stood toe-to-toe, and I understand Buffalo was injured, I understand they made some mistakes early in the game, and I understand the Jets are at home, and they're always the dynamics. The divisional game brings out some wild stuff, but listen, they stood toe-to-toe with the best team in the AFC yesterday. I still think Buffalo is the best team in the AFC, and the Jets stood toe-to-toe and beat them. I'm not saying the Jets are favorites, but the Jets have a puncher's chance against anybody at this point. They have that defensive line, and when you have a defensive line that can play like the Jets can play, you can beat anybody because you can shut down, if you play at your best, you can shut down virtually any offense. The Jets, in the second half of that game, shut down a tremendous Buffalo Bills offense, averaging less than 2 yards per play. I mean, it's just, the defensive line, part of it's Quinn and Williams has just taken the next step this year. But you also have that secondary, that defense, the corner group, Sauce, DJ Reed, even Michael Carter II, who are stifling opposing passing games as well. And I said this during the offseason, if there are 2 spots you can be good at, if I can only be good at 2 spots on the defense, and I want to be good everywhere, but if there are only 2 spots I can be good, I want it to be defensive line and I want it to be corner, because this is a passing league. And those are the 2 spots where you shut down opposing passing games. If the Jets can run the ball like they did yesterday with Michael Carter and James Robinson, they're a tough out. Teams that play defense and run the ball effectively, maybe, the media goes a little too crazy over them because it is a passing league, but you're a tough out if you can do that. And if Zach Wilson, and part of it's the Jets need to continue lifting Zach Wilson up. I think they did a good job with Zach yesterday, but Zach responded. And Zach played efficient, effective football. He was not spectacular. He did not need to be spectacular. The Jets did not ask him to, it was not essential for Zach to be, it was essential for Zach to be smart and efficient. And that's what he was in that game. If the Jets play like that, they're going to be right there, because how many great teams are there in the AFC right now? I go through the list every week. Buffalo, Kansas City, I don't know if you want to say Tennessee maybe when Ryan Tannehill gets back. Not that many. And the Jets just beat one of them. So Jets are going to be in the mix this year. This is going to be an exciting season as we move into the winter, as the weather gets colder. I think the Jets show that they've arrived. The Jets show that they are going to be a team to be reckoned with down the stretch so far this season. And the Jets certainly have a great shot at making the playoffs. And once you get in, a team that's built like the Jets, they can play with anybody. Doesn't mean you'll win. Doesn't mean you'll go all the way. But they're going to be very competitive in this division and in this conference. That's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. Again, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday. Welcome if you're new to the show. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening, and hit the bell if you're watching on YouTube. That way you'll get notifications as new episodes are posted, so you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Both these things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great Monday, everybody. Enjoy this victory. We will be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.